Okay, so I have a video of you hitting the bag in your garage there, Joe,
Some boxing, yeah.
and you are, you are noticeably slimmer. It's what a younger looking right now, all that jazz. You look great. Talk to
Did Julian just
me.
pause?
What are you doing? Did you do anything different?
Sorry, froze up for a second there. Yeah, I'm just trying to get in shape, paying back a lot of taxes.
Yeah. Hmm.
Startups and kids aren't exactly great for the boxing career.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, the
Yeah,
worst.
Um,
I remember a picture of me from Breather back in the day and looking back at that picture and being like, "Oh god, I look terrible." That was before pandemic. Now that is my worst, and I'm just working my way back. So hopefully, it seems to be working for you, and
I'm on
hopefully
the
it'll work
opposite.
for me.
I'm on the opposite end. Me raising money, which is actually I'm
out of
getting
the
some money in,
airport.
which is
Yeah.
better than
That's it.
um
Airport food.
it's yeah, that's what it must be. I don't know. I think I've put on like 20 pounds since we started racing.
The tacos you had with me in San Francisco do not help. So we have Joe Fernandez, a legend in the startup world. We always have him, sort of, but uh, but we had this discussion around Shyp, your company, Kevin, your previous company. I
Yep.
was just looking at the rebrand and how you got like 5 articles just for a rebrand. That's how hot your company was, and Joe was kind enough to say we should talk about Klout and debrief on Klout. And Klout, to me, to give a context to the listener, is first of all, I was a writer and I was a social media person then. This was the height of social companies. Everyone was starting social companies. Friend Feed was bought by Facebook. All this stuff. Social was wild. And and
Which year are you talking about? Which
God, it feels like 2009. 2009
yeah.
is when my first book about social was published. And
Right.
so when that happened, I think Klout is probably mentioned in that book. And Klout to us was the center of everything. Everybody knew their Klout score, all that stuff. So we're going to talk about Klout. And Joe, I want to thank you for your openness in chatting about this with us. It's of course a super long time ago. So first of all, walk us through the very beginning of starting this business. I know you wrote the first lines of code. How did this all begin?
Sure. Yeah. And I really loved Kevin's episode on Shyp and definitely inspired me. And, the feedback from the audience inspired me also to tell some of the Cloud story. Um, maybe I'll just start with like what Cloud was because
Hmm.
it's been long enough that
It's been a long
I
time. Yeah. That's why I asked
more
the
and
year.
more,
Yeah.
yeah, more and more meet people that are like, oh, I was in like middle school then. Yeah, I mean, it feels like I'm talking about like GeoCities or something like really old.
Mhm.
Um, so basically, Clout was a 1 to 100 score on how influential you were across social media. So we ingested Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, like every social network, analyzed the content and analyzed who reacted and how they reacted.
Hmm.
And, had this crazy machine learning algorithm that gave a 1 to 100 score and then had topics so you could be influential about sports or fashion or finance
Mhm.
or whatever. Um, Consumers would sign up to get their cloud score. We had an API where we were doing billions of transactions a day of companies hitting our service to get
Wow.
cloud scores and
Mhm.
doing really interesting things with that we can talk about later. And then brands would pay us to connect with these influencers. And a lot of people say it's kind of like the first real influencer model. And obviously, influence marketing has gotten so huge.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We did a lot of things that were quite different than how it has evolved today. But it's fun kind of looking back at those early days. So that's what Clout was, and then it all started in late 2007.
'Kay.
December of 2007, I had jaw surgery,
Mhm.
and uh, my jaw was completely wired shut for 3 months. So
Is
coming
it
into 2008, like literally
boxing
couldn't
thing?
talk. I'm sorry, what?
Is it a boxing thing?
I wish it was a boxing thing. It was like there's no good story. It was like my jaw was just like misaligned. They had told me when I was like
Okay.
17 that
Uh,
I would need this surgery, and I waited till I was like 30.
Okay.
Um, and it ended up being really intense. Like my jaw was completely wired shut where even like my mom or my girlfriend, I'd have to write down like what I was saying. No one could. I imagined in my mind like, oh, my jaw's wired shut. I just talk like this, but it was like couldn't speak at all. Like everything was really jacked up, and uh, so in that moment, I was like stuck in my apartment. I was living in New York City. It's middle of winter. Um, I'm on a lot of drugs for this surgery,
Hmm.
and I can only rely on Twitter and Facebook really to communicate. Like I was super
Mhm.
isolated. I
Right.
couldn't speak. And it's early in that social media wave, 2008, but like I had been using them just kind of casually. And then in this moment was using them like depending on them and on a lot of drugs and stuff. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And they had APIs and my background was an engineer. So I built a prototype for Klout. I was like, kind of the thesis was every person was going to be a broadcaster. And if you could measure that, that it would be valuable. So I
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
wrote a really simple algorithm and scraped together, like some pretty basic stuff to like pull data from the APIs
Hmm.
and that was really the start of the Cloud Score. So
This is at the time. I want to say I'm 27, 28. We're in the social world and we're trying to figure it out. And everyone is saying, like, my co-author of my first book, Chris Brogan, was a super internet famous dude at the time. And so people were like, oh, this guy is highly influential. This guy is kind of
Mhm.
influential. This guy is up and coming. But of course, and by the way, everyone's talking about social, writing ebooks about it, all these things. And so people are starting to say, let's spend money in this channel talking to influencers, all these other things. But there is no measurement scheme at all.
right.
And so that is the landscape. Is someone comes in and says, here's a measurement score. And for some reason, I have Joe, I want to hear, it takes off. So go on.
Did
What
yeah,
to,
and
to
I
to me, just to step in there to me, there wasn't there kind of, I don't know how you think about this, Joe, but like how I thought about it before, like being an early user of Facebook, like I don't know if you guys remember, there was like the rush up to get as many friends as you possibly could for no like real reason at all, and that somehow like showed that you were some sort of influencer or something.
Hmm.
And the same thing with Twitter for followers. So I think
Yeah.
people did use those numbers to kind of like
Yeah. You
a
were
little
looking
bit.
at raw follower numbers,
Yes,
but there was also like, the
totally,
follower to following ratio. Like there were all these
totally,
early things
totally,
that
totally.
you were looking at and saying, oh, this person is cool. He follows 5 people, but he's
Yes,
got 1 million followers. Wow. Who is that
right,
guy? Right.
right.
And so Joe is in the center of it, trying to figure it all out.
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, it was I'll also add before this era, the previous era was like MySpace. And
Right.
that was social media effectively. I don't know if we were calling it that. It was certainly a social network. Um, but it was felt very much like a kid's thing, like a
Mm.
teenage, early
Mm,
20s thing.
Music.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, Twitter and Facebook and this like explosion happened where it was like the conversation in that moment was like, oh, social media matters. And it's not just for
Mm.
kids, it
mhm,
matters for your
mhm.
career, it matters for the world. And people were putting a lot of effort into, as Julian said, figuring that out, but also into their own profiles. And Clout was like, one of the first things that was just like, are you doing a good job or not?
Yeah.
And, and it blew up. It did take off. Like it was like act of God. It was like lightning. It just took off so fast. And it was
Hmm.
like, the name Clout was like a big,
Yep.
Great name.
uh,
With a K.
with a K. It we I called it the standard for influence. Like that was like day one, like across the standard for
That's
influence was
great.
like and there was other scores at the moment and the
Mhm.
name and that kind of took a lot of wind out of other people's sails.
Really?
And then there was just this like ego crack component of like
Mm.
I want to know what everyone's score is. I want to see what my score is. Like
Mhm.
that just, kind of captured the meme of the moment.
Is it possible, Joe, that and this is just my memory, but like people could even put like a banner of what their Klout score was, like on their site or some version like that. Is that possible?
I mean, later on, yeah, we had all sorts of tools to like
Yeah.
propagate the Klout score as far as
So,
we
but
could get it.
you were is the ego crack component. I mean, I want to know what my Klout score is, right? And when someone else is higher than me, I'm like, fuck that guy, right?
Totally.
So you could see this happening.
Yeah, I mean, it was a super simple, the 1 to 100 score. We all know from school and a million other things what that score means, and you can super digestible, you can compare it, you can compete. Like it spoke to like a really primal instinct of like, do I matter?
I used
Right.
to I used the Chrome extension to show everybody's Klout scores against each other, and then I would use it to compare my own all the time. And yeah, it was such a like social hook, and I was just
Right.
it
Yeah.
was kind of like a drug almost.
Yeah, it was
It
wild.
definitely. So, okay,
So
the moment of lightning, though, you kind of said it was lightning in a bottle that happened. Do you remember, or was there a specific moment or something?
it it was like moment one. It was so nuts.
When you
So
launched it, like you launched it, you got press coverage, and that was it.
yeah, so like, you know, more context, like, my background is engineering. I'd done some startups, but they were like bootstrapped little
Mm.
things.
Yeah,
I knew no one. I was living in New York City.
right.
I didn't even really know what venture capital was. I had never met a single person who worked at Google. Like
I
that's
love this
how,
story. I
I was
love it.
not like in the scene in any way. Um, I built this thing and I didn't know what it even meant to launch, like how you launch. And I think at the time I had maybe 50 followers on Twitter, like 100 at best. So it's not like I had a profile or a clout. Um, and I so there was no strategy in the launch. It wasn't like I built up to this big like press moment. Launch was, and I remember it really specifically because it was my then girlfriend, now wife's birthday,
Okay.
which is Christmas Eve. So like the worst, like you would never launch something on Christmas Eve. And launch was just me tweeting my cloud score. I was like, oh, I'm not a very good engineer. So like it was a big moment that I like figured out how to like make it tweetable. And I was like,
Okay.
I tweeted my cloud score and we went to dinner. And I was like, before we
I
go to dinner,
can't
I want to get
believe
this
this.
done. We tweeted my
Wow.
cloud score and I came back and like that night and over the next few days, like I got a Gawker, which was like, a big
Yeah.
Gawker
Mhm.
wrote an article about Klout on like day 2
What
Wow.
the fuck?
on like,
It was truly
and
like viral.
it was truly viral. And then
Wow.
uh, there was the first week of January. So again, this was Christmas Eve, like that week between Christmas and New Year's, just like dealing with signups. And here's the funny thing. The site was so bad when people signed up, I manually would download their data,
Yeah.
manually upload, paste it into Excel,
Mhm.
run the formula, manually update their page, and then manually email them that their score's ready. So I spent that whole week just like trying to process people. I had my wife sitting next to my girlfriend at the time, now wife,
Mhm.
sitting next to me processing people. And we're like pumping out cloud scores.
What does it
And
feel like? What does this feel like when you're doing this?
it was just like, holy shit. And I was just like, I thought it would kind of, it would pop. Like it was just like uh, a fad that would go away. But I was also like,
Right.
whoa, this is crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
And then New York Tech Meetup was a big thing at the time.
It still is.
Still is. I got a ping from somebody there who was like, hey, we're our January 3rd or 4th or 6th, like first week of January. Do you want to present Klout at the New York Tech Meetup? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds cool. And I remember getting off the train to walk to that meeting and being like, what the fuck am I doing? I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm about to get in
And this
front
is just you
audience
right
of-
now. There's no
Just me,
other
just me.
employees.
Mhm.
Okay.
There's no employees, not even a company. You
Mhm.
know,
Right.
Joe,
Right.
was it Scott Heiferman who invited you? Because I
it was
remember.
Nate, Nate. I can't pronounce his last name, but it was Nate. Was like
Okay. Got it.
ran the New York meetup at that moment.
Yeah.
So I get invited. Um, I'm panicking walking to the event because I'm like, I'm going to get in front of an audience of New Yorkers and tell them I have the algorithm to determine how important they are. Like, I'm going to get shredded. There's a video somewhere online of the event, and like my hand is like shaking holding the mic. And I get up
Mm.
there and I, give a little thing about Klout and,
Wait,
and really positioned it, which was true, is that, the belief that everyone has influence. And
Right.
our goal is to understand who they influence and about what. And
this is
kind of-
amazing. We're in phase one of what I hope is many, many minutes of talking about this. So first of all, would you be open to me trying to find that video and maybe posting it in the notes?
Yeah,
or would that?
And I have a picture. I definitely have the picture still. That's crazy how big the crowd was. I remember just being terrified.
Hmm.
Like I'd maybe spoken in front of 10 people before, but like
If-
that was
if-
like 1,000.
If we had a producer, I would get them to put the
We
picture up
don't.
right now, but we don't.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does it feel like to present in front of all these people, other than the shaking?
It was awesome for sure, but also just crazy. And then you get surrounded by people and everyone's asking questions and everyone
Right.
signs up, and I'm still going home and trying to manually process
Wow.
them. So all of that was enough that I made the decision to quit my job. Like I had a job.
Where was that
Wow.
at?
Did you write code for a living?
So I wasn't like, I hadn't started Klout really. Like I was, like I was working for a data company in New York. I was like, softly a late co-founder. I ran like product and engineering for like a company that did real estate data.
Wow.
Okay.
So I left. I was like, I'm going to go focus on this thing. I couldn't convince any of my friends to quit their jobs to come do it because New York tech scene was still
Wow.
super small.
Right.
So I knew a guy who was a New Yorker. He had married a Singaporean woman and moved to Singapore and opened an offshore dev shop in Singapore.
Okay.
I did a deal with him. I had no money. I hadn't raised money.
Mhm.
I did a deal with him to get dev hours in exchange for equity. He believed in the idea. He was like, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
So I got a team, but this is pre-Zoom, pre-everything.
Right.
And I had managed a remote team before and knew how terrible it was. I was like, this won't work. So I offshored myself. I moved to Singapore.
Wow.
I went to Singapore and
Joe, this story is so good.
I've never heard any of these things.
Does your wife come? Does your girlfriend come?
we're
Wow.
just like, and this is like, it's kind of a question of like, are we going to stay together? Like it's
Sure.
that kind of moment in our relationship.
Wow.
We'd been together a few years, but it was like unsure. And I was like, I'm doing this thing. I'm going to go focus on this. She's in New York. So I go to Singapore
With no money.
with no money for
Yeah.
like 8 months.
Wow.
And but I'm like starting to research and I'm like, I think if I can get this prototype, if I can get from this alpha to a beta, I can raise money
Right.
and then I'll be all right. And I get to Singapore and like, I don't know, one of the first days I'm there, like Lehman Brothers happens, like
Oh,
world financial
shit.
apocalypse. And I'm just like laying on the couch in the office in Singapore, staring at the ceiling, like, what the fuck did
Wow.
I do?
Wow.
Holy shit.
I think it's economically important to state at this stage, lots of people are trying to quote unquote monetize their podcasts or monetize their social media following. And it had never occurred to me up until this time that actually that is against a mirror of economic crazy uncertainty that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So no wonder people are trying to figure out how influential they are and that there are 500, which at the time was maybe a lot, Twitter followers, if they could make a living. I quit my job in fucking 2007 trying to monetize my podcast. And I bet people were looking to find a way to figure out whether I was worthwhile.
Totally.
Me and hundreds of thousands of people. So is it still going viral by this point though?
It's ebbing and flowing. For a few months, I actually turned to a waiting list because I just couldn't I was manually processing everyone, so
Oh,
which meant not doing actual work.
Okay.
So then I was trying to like not let it die and not let other people get ahead, and kind of rush to get this thing going. I go to Singapore. I basically kind of live at the office, and then I'm sleeping at one of the developers' house. I become friends with one of the developers who lets me stay at his house because I have like no money. Um, this is
Huh.
another thing. Pre AWS, so I find another friend who has a hosting service, and I like give him equity to host the thing. Um, the
This is so
guy,
raw. Oh my God.
can I
the
ask?
guy
Uh,
who
can I ask like how much percent of the company did you give up for both of these developers and the hosting company? Because I'm assuming at this point you don't know if this is going to turn into anything.
Mm,
Like there's crazy stories
of
of people
course.
making like so much money off early equity. Was it anything crazy?
I think it was like about 4% total,
Okay.
and which was fun. So funny part of that, the guy's wife, who is the developer, she would call me screaming, like, "Pay your fucking bill," because she
Wow.
ran the books, and
Yes.
and he would be like, "Just let her vent. Don't worry." Like
What?
he's
Mhm.
billing me, but like
You're-
he knows I'm not paying, and we have this agreement for equity. And she's calling me screaming
Oh
that
my
like,
God.
I'm ripping them off and that she's gonna pull the plug and if she
Wow.
doesn't get money.
Okay.
And yeah, a few years later they're rich and very thankful and they're all very good friends and I wouldn't have made it without them, but it was like a very tense thing.
Wow. Oh,
Um,
wow.
so I'm in Singapore. Um, Girlfriend, now wife, is in New York. She decides she's kind of over New York and she wants to move to LA.
Okay.
She's a writer, kind of totally different world. I come back to LA and like start trying to launch Klout. I was trying to build Klout in LA. And this is
Mhm.
now like early 2009.
Okay. So
Uh,
you've been at this for a year and a half by this point.
yeah, have raised $0.
Wow.
Wow.
It's just me. I come back to LA and I come back and kind of, you know, move back in with my girlfriend, now wife. Uh, I also meet up with my first boss that I had out of college,
Okay.
at my first engineering job.
Mhm.
And he's the boss who demoted me from engineering to QA because I was such a bad engineer. He was the CTO of this like kind of startup. He demoted me to QA. But he's a cool guy. We stay in touch. And I ping him and he's in LA. I show him Klout and he's like, this is actually sick. And
Huh.
I convince him to join as my co-founder.
Wow.
Wow.
And then the two of us back to Singapore to work with the team. So us
Oh
two
my
go
Wow.
back to Singapore
God.
for another 4 or 6 months.
From Los Angeles after telling your girlfriend that you're moving to Los Angeles
Yeah, we go
in
back to
order.
Singapore.
What? What?
So we're in Singapore now. I have a co-founder now. There's at least 2 of us, and we're
Mhm.
working in person with the team. There's a little bit of a weird dynamic. He's my former boss, but now I'm the boss.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
But get along great.
Wow.
We build, we kind of get the thing working, and like, we get to what becomes like the real launch, like the real kind of product people start to know.
Mhm.
And at this point,
We're
out of
going back and forth.
the manual processes are kind of solved.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can
Got it.
sign
Okay.
up. But it's really, really challenging because Twitter is growing ridiculously fast. And
Absurdly
we are
fast.
trying to keep up.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, a thing on Klout is like, the goal was that everyone had a Klout score. And this is actually an important point is like, it wasn't just the people who signed up. Like it was an open API. So we
Yeah.
scored
Yeah.
everyone. So the
Mhm.
system was just always running. So like we really struggled on like getting people to getting like a profile to get a score, but then like it could be a year before that score refreshes because we just
Mhm.
didn't have the compute power. And then also the Twitter API was dog shit. Like
Right.
it would
It-
crash all the
at the
times.
at the moment of this recording, right here, right now, we're in the middle of a struggle with Reddit and the API,
Right.
where like a bunch of these things are being shut down from Reddit, and Steve Huffman deliberately
Mhm.
shut them down. He's the CEO today, and he was a co-founder. Now, in this circumstance, keep in mind, before all this, literally the whole social web is like, we're open, we're open, we're open. Jack Dorsey, Ev Williams, the other guys, excuse me, it's insulting. I don't remember, but I don't. Those guys especially are open web advocates in a
Mhm.
really, really big way. They're not the Facebook closed wall garden method. So every API is open. So this is a moment in time, Joe, where this was possible. Am I right? But
Yeah. Yeah.
but
That's a
not
key point because,
anymore.
right. It's a different, that's why there's not a new Klout.
Hmm.
Was
It was this
was
window
Facebook
where there
open?
was this pretty open, like
Okay.
not, not compared to Twitter, but compared to now, it was like, pretty open.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was some things you could do to like get to the data that, are kind of frowned upon now, but we're like, not that you were trying to do something shady, but just we didn't think of like how the negative ways that stuff could be used.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was this moment where access was open, but it was really tenuous. Like,
Mhm.
there was a lot of concern of like, well, how long is this window open? What if
Right.
Twitter pulls the
Right.
plug, etc.
Yeah, of course.
Which
Like
turned into
anything else.
be a
So
real like an actual like real concern.
yeah, and I mean, foreshadowing to selling the company, it was
Yeah.
Mhm.
one of the two reasons we sold the company.
Right.
Mhm.
Um, so let's see, we are bouncing between LA and Singapore.
Yeah.
Um, then now we're starting to spend more time in LA, and I'm now going up to San Francisco every week because I'm both trying to establish relationships with Twitter and those folks, but
Right.
then also trying to raise money.
Mhm.
Um,
The world
so I'm
happens. You see that Twitter is this how you become kind of aware of venture capital? Like you see Twitter raises money, so you're like, why not Klout or something?
yeah, and I started, meeting people and asking questions and talking and um, just kind of bumping through the system and
Mhm.
there's not the like, I don't know, industrial startup complex that exists today of like
Sure.
podcast and articles and substacks and tweets like didn't exist then. So it was
Yeah.
kind of like,
Mhm.
you just kind of meet people and ask questions and stumble through it.
And
I
Joe,
think
like, did
at
you go ahead?
okay. I think at that time also like meetups and events were like a really big thing to actually meet people.
Huge.
And that's why I think
Totally.
one of the
Huge.
reasons San Francisco became kind of the hub for everything. That's the reason that I moved down there as well. Did you find that, and I don't want to foreshadow you kind of, I am going to now moving to SF, but was that one of the reasons that you were just able to get into and meet so many
Yeah.
people, whether it be developers at like these tech events or investors? Well, at that time instead of going to San Francisco, it was walking down Sand Hill Road, and that was the only way that you could raise any money. If anybody remembers that, I remember
Totally.
that, and now it's just like the last time I've been there has
Mhm.
been, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago.
Ghost Town. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I was starting to come to San Francisco every week. And,
Mhm.
it became clear that Klout needed to be in San Francisco.
Yeah.
I was out trying to raise money. I was trying to build
Mhm.
these relationships. And it also was clear that LA wasn't there yet from a talent perspective of like being able to build this company here. I think
Right.
now it's not the case, but back then it was.
Right.
So we packed up, we'd only been back in LA for a few months and packed up and moved to San Francisco. This is like late 2009, I think.
It's very clear by this point that your wife loves you,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, she's paying the bills, so I have like no real income.
Mhm.
My co-founder also moves up to San Francisco.
Mhm.
And it's, we're like starting, we're still trying to raise money. let's see what's like. I guess maybe the next milestone is actually raising the money. So it
Mhm.
took me about 18 months from starting like having a deck, like being like I'm fundraising,
Mhm.
to closing the first $1.5 million.
Right.
And
Unbelievable in today's standards. Unbelievable.
yeah,
Yeah.
that $1.5 million was from 37 angel investors. So it's like
Wow.
all small checks.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, the biggest check was like
largest
250,
one? Yeah.
maybe 250,000
Okay.
from a small New
Any
York
shout outs?
fund. I mean, that's so many good people. I had this guy, John Frankel from FFVC in New York, was like, he invested in the company like 8 times.
Wow.
Mhm.
Had Tom McInerney, an LA Angel, was like an early key supporter. Paige Craig, another LA at the time Angel. Like we had
Mhm.
a lot of angels who've done really, really well. Like we were like their first kind of deal.
Wow.
So it's cool to see. Uh, Raised $1.5 million, and just, it's also funny. It was called a Series A. Seed
Wow.
was not really a
Right.
term,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and it was on a $3 million pre. It was a priced round,
What?
$3 million pre.
A 3 million
Joe,
pre.
this
Uh,
story.
So
Wow.
so
Yeah.
Wow.
you gave up at this point. What is that math? Is that 40% of the company?
50% of the company
Well,
No, I
that's
mean,
pre,
it's like a
right?
third
over
because
time. No,
yeah.
but over time, you know?
Right.
So yeah, it was like, and then we started hiring people in San Francisco.
Okay.
Actually, this is a key part of the story. We get our first office,
Yeah.
and it's been 2 of us for a while. We get a third guy. Um, Funny side story. One of our first contractors was Howie, the CEO of Airtable. He was like a contractor
Wow.
on Cloud.
That's
He had just graduated
awesome.
college, but we were like
Yeah.
bouncing through people. Like we didn't
Mhm.
have money to bring people as full employees, so we'd contract people or whatever. We're working out of
Mhm.
like apartments and other people we meet's office. We get our first office, and I'm like realizing that the relationship with Twitter specifically
Yeah.
is key.
Yeah.
So
Twitter
key,
gets a new
right?
office at 4th and Folsom.
South
Yep.
Park. Oh, no, Folsom. Okay.
Yeah, the
Got it.
fourth. This is the second one because they were in South Park first, and I was going, but they moved to their bigger office at 4th and Folsom.
Mhm.
They have the whole top floor of this building. I get us an office in the same building. Like
You are so good.
that was like,
That is, yeah.
there's like 2 things that like changed the trajectory of Klout, because there were 3 things I'd say changed the trajectory of Klout. There were 5, 6, 7 other Twitter influence companies at the time.
Really?
Like
Uh-huh.
anyone smart enough to hit the Twitter API and use a calculator was building a Twitter influence score. It felt like.
I
And we
had
just like
no
sucked the
idea.
air.
Yeah, I only thought it was
Oh
Klout.
yeah.
Mhm.
That's
No,
wild.
we weren't the first, and there was a bunch. And that name Klout, putting our office in the Twitter building, because like I was up there in their office enough that the person working the front desk thought I worked at Twitter. I could just like walk in. So like there would be like a rumor about like Twitter shutting off API access or something. I would just walk upstairs and go
Boom.
ask. And like, or like if we had, we would just like see people in the elevator. I'd be like, oh, what's going on with this? And then the other thing, this was an era where it was like a really big deal to make the pilgrimage to San Francisco.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So every day I just ran a Twitter search, and people would tweet something like, really excited going to Twitter HQ today. And I would just respond, stop by Klout. We're on the first floor. We had like the
Wow.
CMO of Coke in our office when we were 4 people. Like we like hijacked
All the
these
hustle
meetings. We
you
had like
have, Joe.
all hustle. So it was
But I
like,
mean, he's scraping the Twitter API already, to be clear. So all he
Yeah.
has to do is scrape it with the
In a-
direction.
just gonna
in a-
ride their wave as hard as I can. Yeah, we were like that little bacteria, or that like when they show like a fish that follows like a bigger fish,
Yeah.
know.
I've got 2
I mean,
questions.
Airbnb is.
So
Go ahead. Yeah.
first question, how big are you guys at this time as far as users or however you measure your metrics? And then also, how did Twitter, I guess that was your most important partner, how did they feel about you guys?
So we were growing, we were adding probably about 1,000 users a day.
Okay.
Um, and that, kind of peak Klout probably got to 100,000 a day. Um, but we were adding like 1,000 a day. So we were getting to like 100,000-ish users, hundreds of thousands of users.
Mhm.
Um, we were, when we got that office space, we were 3 employees and we grew in that office to, I don't know, 15. My co-founder and I had no network in San Francisco. It wasn't like we had worked at Google or even Yahoo was a hot company then. Like it wasn't like we had 5 friends we could pool. So the bar to get hired at Klout in those early days was like, you're willing to quit your other job. So like we kind of famously went through a lot of people. And because we would just be like, we'll give you a shot and come in and like we would, there was the like hire slow, fire fast. We like hired fast and fired fast.
That'll work. That'll do it.
And yeah, but some people were, we got some real interesting folks. Some though were amazing and stayed with us through the whole journey.
Yeah.
But it was like a real ragtag, scrappy crew.
Okay. Years later, I meet Joe. Okay, and I meet him at an event. Where the hell were we? At some vineyard somewhere or something?
Yeah, it was like a Chihuahua Chen,
Yeah.
Good Water. He was doing their like offsite.
Yeah, he was a Kleiner at the time, and that's how he got to know you. When I met you, so first of all, to me, you are. Now I know you're just a guy, but at the time, you were a god. Because like Klout was like, in your house and like there are books, not even chapters, but whole books dedicated to your company, whole books.
It was so weird because it got so huge. Like it became like there's a Workaholics episode, like a full episode of that show.
Wow.
There's books. Like we started getting so much press. I mean, we were getting like hundreds of pieces of press a day where we had to hire our first PR firm. Their job was to kill press because there was too much. Like
Wow.
it was like, it was overwhelming. It felt like I was in a hurricane. Like it was just
Mhm.
people were so interested in it. Just, again, it was like the meme of the moment that kept going.
What did it?
What's your biggest fear at this time? Oh, sorry, the Twitter API, but what's the next biggest fear?
Like in a lot of ways, I'm just trying to hold on. Like
Okay.
Right.
every day is the biggest day. The biggest company I had worked at was like 10 people and I wasn't even the boss.
Mhm.
So like organizationally, I'm struggling. Like I'm in the middle, I got like everyone wants time. Like it's just, it's starting to get real momentum. It's getting cultural momentum even faster than business momentum. So it's really this feeling of like, wow, am I creating the hurricane or am I just like in the hurricane?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
it was really fun, but it was like, it was wild.
What did you feel like yourself?
You're still at a
And
$4.5 million post at the time.
yeah,
Still in a
wh-
4.5 million and money's, yeah. So like, we don't have a lot of resources, but we're
Mhm.
getting a lot of interest. And so here comes the, what is the Series B? And everyone wants the meeting. It had taken 18
Mhm.
months to raise the Series A. Like this is going to go fast. But it's still, there's still a lot of questions. There's questions about me. Like there's a lot of firms who are just like, I had multiple firms like literally say like, we're into your company, but we think like we would need a new CEO. Have
At least they
like,
told you.
yeah,
yeah.
that's like a whole other story. Have, just questions of like, is this a fad or is it, there's still like debate, but people want to take the meeting. People are really interested in
Yeah.
like, it's like kind of a hot deal. Super drama around. Like this is a whole episode, like, super, super drama. Like I did a lot of things wrong and things got a little crazy, but Kleiner ends up leading the round. And so this is a
Yeah.
Series B. It's $8 million on a $15 million pre. And,
Right.
which is a lot then. And
Yeah.
we have the stamp of approval. We have Kleiner. Like, and Kleiner's still super hot.
Yep.
Yep. That's right.
Being
Well,
Gordon,
yeah.
Being Gordon leads the deal. The other two boards he's on are Zynga and Amazon at the moment.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
And
Zynga's
Bing
like
Gordon is
the
still amazing even
And he's a-
today, I think.
Yeah, he's incredible.
think,
He's a co-founder of EA.
I think I think he was the one who may have actually suggested Jeff's Create Prime. I think that was his contribution. Yeah. Yeah.
Not bad. So this is, important, that stamp of approval is key, but we never had a board before this.
Mhm.
And now I have I have a Kleiner. I've never been to a board meeting. I don't know what board are.
Yep.
And I bring Bing Gordon into my boardroom, who the other two CEOs he sits next to are Mark Pincus and Jeff Bezos. Two of the, in that moment, the two alpha baddest CEOs on the planet.
I
And I'm
relate
like,
to this story so
cool,
much.
what do we do in this meeting?
I love everything. I hope we do 5 episodes on this. Keep going. Go on.
It's a disaster because I'm just so over my head.
Yeah.
And Bing is great, but he's a lot, and I'm not there to spar with him and to get the most out of him. I'm also you asked this question of what am I afraid of? I'm afraid of screwing up, and now I'm looking at it as well, I have Kleiner Perkins in the deal. They did Google, they did Amazon. I've got access to these people. I should listen to them because they're probably smarter than me.
I asked Kevin during the Shyp conversation, the following thing: is this a phase where you felt I am God, right? And I believe that the lots of founders where their thing takes off, they at least have one moment, by themselves. They don't tell anyone, but they feel I am God. And Kevin said yes. And I know I've felt that like an idiot in my past. And so is this the moment, or are you still more afraid of the big wigs?
I'm still afraid. In fact, I'm hiring a CEO coach to help me with presence and help me with confidence in those moments and things like that. I'm kind of just oh shucks, I built this thing in my bedroom and now people care about it and what's going on.
Do you think that had anything to do with the time, the way things in tech kind of shifted, and how you saw all of these other people, especially if you lived in San Francisco or whatever, you saw all these peers that just created these massive companies, and it's just well, why can't I do it? And that's definitely what happened to me. And for you to be a total outsider, Joe, do you think it was more on I'll listen to these investors more? Because I definitely did not get anything like that at all. I didn't feel that from starting Shyp. I thought that it was great idea. My ego was pretty large after we got any sort of a momentum, but also we started in 5 or 6 years afterwards. So tech had completely changed, venture capital had changed. Do you think it was a sign of the times, or do you think that it was just your character?
I think it was a lot of the sign of the times. My wife would definitely say not my character. Because the ego is definitely not something I'm a stranger to. But I felt, again, I didn't know anybody. I felt, that it created a really, I think, negative dynamic actually in those relationships, because I was oh, Kleiner, thank you for taking this shot on me. I won't disappoint you. There was a power imbalance where they were okay, kid, we're watching you.
How old are you?
And
them?
Yeah, and I'm not that young. I'm 32 at this point, 31.
Okay.
I was I was a late starter.
Sure.
Right.
But I'm not that young. And and I was just really, I was really insecure about I didn't go to Stanford. I didn't go to any of these schools or know anybody or know anything. So, I felt
Just a boxer from Vegas. That's who you are.
Just a kid from Vegas who likes to fight. So yeah, it was the dynamic was weird. I struggled a lot in kind of managing that board, and I felt we were kind of we lost probably a year, maybe more, kind of day trading on strategy of
really,
this is the hot thing that it's kind of spinning constantly. And
Is
It just took me a long
that's
time
within your
to get
board?
confidence.
Within your board that happened?
Yeah, as the board kind of came in and we hired a lot of people and we're ramping and like again, but we have massive product market fit. Every day is the biggest day.
Right.
Like
Right.
it's
Right.
awesome from that standpoint.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I'm going through a lot of learning. Like I'm trying to learn how to like manage the board and get my own confidence that they're just people and they're data points for me to take in and make
Yeah.
decisions against.
Yep.
I'm also learning, Klout was this thing where like everything that had been put out, I had touched in some way. Like I wrote
Okay.
code or I designed a screen or I wrote copy or I did
Mhm.
something really hands-on to being like, oh, my job is not the product. My job is the
The
org
business.
and the system
Yeah.
and like thinking in systems mode. And so like adjusting to that. Every new person we hire is now the biggest company I've ever worked at.
Mhm.
And then we're just getting massive press and not all good press. Like a lot of it is backlash because the press is
Right.
so far ahead of where the company is that like, there's just like, Cloud was really controversial. Like we put a number, we built a profile for you, whether you signed up or not, and then put a number next to your face. And so
Yeah.
it was like, there's like an aggressiveness to that like,
Yeah.
and then you'd get a
And
lot of people, these articles that would be like, effectively fuck Clout. And they'd be like, this is the school lunch table
Mhm.
all over again. And like, I would never judge somebody, I treat everyone the same. Meanwhile, those people are signing in every day to check their score, but it's like
Of course.
bash Clout to raise your
Right.
Clout.
And Joe, is there also keep in mind at the time the biggest celebrities on social are not celebrities.
Yeah, it's like
They
Ashton
are
Kutcher.
Ashton Kutcher being on
They're
Twitter
just,
is
like, the
amazing.
most celebrity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oprah
Right.
has Twitter on, the founders, and is like, I'm going to sign up right now. And so does Ellen DeGeneres or whoever. And that day is just the most exciting day because of real celebrity. So at the time, I'm going to guess a bunch of celebrities also check their cloud scores and they're shitty. Is that right?
Oh, it's crazy. So like I get a message gets to me from Britney Spears' like manager or somebody on her team
No.
that they are pissed off that her cloud score is lower than Lady Gaga's. And they come to the office, meet with me and like
No, they
talk about
don't.
and then I'm getting messages like, I get like message Bill Gates knows his cloud score and Puffy's
Oh.
mad about his cloud score and like all these people like cloud and then I can see who's registering every day and I'm like, oh, the Barack Obama account registered and the Twitter API is a mess. I'm like, oh, we could technically tweet from the Barack Obama account if we want.
No.
Like,
Oh my God.
yeah,
What?
it's just like Wild West.
Wow.
Can I
It's
ask
really
what was the actual algorithm like as far as I'd assume there's some sort of followers in there. How did you actually determine influence? The engagement on tweets, obviously.
Yeah. So it evolved a lot from like, straight up a spreadsheet to a really complex machine learning model. And there were, it got really, really complicated over time because you'd have like, oh, it's just Twitter, then it's Twitter and Facebook, then it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, then you keep adding networks. Now you have this like currency conversion question of like, is the retweet the same as a like on Facebook? And how does
Right.
that compare to a reshare on this thing? And like, and how do you balance those networks out? So without getting overly complicated, a few key things we cared about. There was this belief that I still believe that like we didn't really care about follower count. And because it's so easy to game and it's like you see a lot of people with big follower counts and really shallow engagement. What we cared about is like when you create content, like what's the reaction?
Right.
And who are the people reacting? So like, Beyonce or Oprah are good examples of this. They actually aren't very active on social, but when they are, it's like massive reaction. And it's like,
Right.
so inbound, outbound is like a really critical thing we thought about is like, you could brute force your way to a lot of retweets and a lot of likes by just posting a shit ton of content, but you're really just noisy.
Mhm.
So thinking about like when you create content, how do people react and who reacts? The other thing that was, that I don't think people totally realize, but like we ran every piece of content through natural language processing to
Mm.
figure out, was this tweet or this article they shared about, you know, travel or about the city of Boston or
Mm.
about AI or whatever it was about, to then rank you on the topic level. Um, Other interesting things about the Cloud score, well, kind of detour there. The score I mentioned is like the was really dependent or really there was a strong weight to like how influential the people are that interact with your content. But we would see this deflation where like around the holidays everyone kind of went offline. So
Right.
everyone's score would kind of like start going down and it would start dragging everyone out. There was like massive deflation. Like it became like, we had
Huh.
all these PhDs. It was like managing an economy. We would see stuff like everyone in Indonesia's scores going up. And we'd have to go figure out that they're using Twitter different than we were or some other
Huh.
weird thing and like change the model. We got really huge in Japan, really huge in Brazil, really huge in
Wow.
Indonesia. So it was like,
Yeah.
it was really crazy.
Japan famously has their own Twitter that is like really different from other Twitters.
Yeah.
Is there a relation there somehow?
I don't know. Like, I don't know if it's like because these like honor societies where like your name matters a lot.
Right.
Mm.
But we ended up getting investors from Japan and being really
Mhm.
big there. It was fun.
So at this point, you're still Kleiner, 37 Angels, and you've raised $9.5 million.
Right.
Your valuation is, what was it? 22
23.
posts. I
Yeah, like
fucking
20.
love this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it was like
you're
8 on 15.
getting 10 to 100,000 users a day. Is there any monetization?
Yes. So we started monetizing what is called Klout perks. So
I remember
brands
those.
brands pay us to connect them with influencers. And we do it
Hmm.
really, this sounds very familiar to anyone, influencer marketing is huge now. Ours was really different. We would work with like our first customer was I think Starbucks. And they were launching some new drink and they wanted influencers. So they wanted people influential about coffee to try this new drink.
Hmm.
We know who those people are.
Hmm.
So those people were registered for Klout. They would get an email saying like, hey, because you're so influential about coffee, Starbucks is offering you this. Do you want it? So people would opt into the campaign. Then we would have Starbucks, in this case, I think it actually was like a thing they sold in the grocery store. They would ship it to a 3PL for us. And then we would ship it to the influencer. We never sold a list. Like we
Got it.
controlled the
Wow.
relationship.
This is actually great. I was going to say it got to be some involved in certain size of GMV or something. You became a kind of advertising broker for a giant long line of super long tail set of people or something.
Yeah. And we we also to the influencer, we never told them like, hey, you have to tweet, use this hashtag. It was like the bet we made was these are people influential about this topic. If we put them in the right situation, they're going to talk about it. And we would then get the
Discovery.
brand a report at the end saying like, here's all the content. So we got famous because our first set of customers were crazy. It was like Audi, Starbucks, Nike, and Virgin America.
What's this transaction size? I got to know.
They're kind of like $25,000 to $100,000.
Okay. That's sizable.
But they're critical for us, not from the revenue perspective, because they legitimize the Klout score.
Right.
Virgin
right,
America
right.
is literally giving away plane tickets to people influential about travel. It makes you care about the score. It makes the score real. All the conversation about like which Twitter score do you follow and why are they bullshit goes away because there's now like top tier brands doing deals based on the Klout score.
So this is why
that becomes a huge focus for us is like make the Klout score matter. So we have a giant biz dev team. We're doing tons of deals.
So that's why I think it's so interesting that like this doesn't exist even within the like Twitter as a platform or Instagram as a platform, right? Because all that advertisers can go off of is like their followers or their engagement on likes and everything like that. And I guess that's one way that you can pay like $250,000 for Kim Kardashian to tweet about this or Instagram or whatever. But it seems like there should be an influencer marketing. This should exist, even if it is siloed within the actual companies, but it'd be even better if it wasn't and it was across all social networks. But I think obviously that Twitter shut down their API and you have to pay a shitload of money for it. Facebook is basically closed. All of those other things makes it not realistic. Like this still does today in 2023 seem like something that should be very relevant to any brands.
Yes, because it's a real industry now.
Yeah. There's, the platforms have made it impossible to do this.
Yeah.
But I don't know why they don't do it themselves. I have some ideas. It is
Right. Yeah.
logistically painful. And we really were, we would tell people, be like, well, I want to get it to Kim Kardashian or Justin Bieber or whatever. And we would say that that's not like, sure, that's a different thing. We actually were really focused on what I called like the citizen influencer or the long tail or the niche influencer,
Right.
people who had a Klout score like 40 to 60, who are normal people who, just happen to be the person in their friend group who
Mine
was
was
really active on
73.
social.
I have to ask you.
Damn, that's good.
He knows. I
Yeah.
want to know. I would love to do if you're willing. I would love to do a part 2 of this. I
Yes,
just realized
let's do it.
I got like an HBO True Blood thing in the mail, and that HBO True Blood, I didn't know what it was. It was a mystery package, and it contained supposed blood. It did not, but it looked like blood.
No, it was blood.
No. Did someone pay you to contact me and send me a True Blood thing? Is that how kind of it worked?
Probably. That sounds like we did hundreds and hundreds of these, and like, from HBO, like was a client to, like McDonald's was like our actual biggest client was McDonald's, but we did stuff with like Audi and Disney and like, I
Wow.
think we had worked with 70 of the like digital 100 like consumer brands.
This
and
is
I mean,
unbelievable.
And these brands were effectively paying us for our own user acquisition. Because the
Yeah.
box
They're
came
renting
with,
it. Yeah.
because when you got the box for True Blood, if it was from us, it came in a Klout box. Like it was like a designed box that was Klout.
right.
So everyone would, it was, so people would tweet, there'd be an unboxing of like, thanks to Klout, I got this thing. And then
I did
everyone's
that.
like, wait, what is that? And then, so we would just
Oh.
get, every single campaign just brought us more users.
So this is
That's
so
amazing.
exciting. First of all, this is an amazing series. Okay. And so
It
it is.
is.
I am learning so much about product market fit, even fucking work from y'all. Right. Like it's crazy.
This is what it really feels like when you have it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I wish every entrepreneur could feel it for at least a minute, because it's nuts. And
It's nuts.
Wow. So
it's like that. Kevin and I are both trying to like get that high back because
sure.
like,
From the dragon,
it's-
baby.
Yeah.
Well, no, actually for our company now, we have it, but we're a B2B company, so we don't have that consumer product
it's just
market
different.
fit.
Yeah.
So,
it doesn't.
but-
It
But
doesn't
the
feel
hype,
same.
the hype that we had, I actually don't want to ever feel that hype again.
Consumer.
I get the hype out of it.
Y'all, thank you for this.
This is awesome, Joe.
Joe, I hope you will let us do a B2. This is so fun. And I first of all, I already respected you, but I respect you more having gone through this. The boxer from Vegas all the way to getting calls from Beyonce. I love it.
Britney
and
Spears.
Thank you for your openness. It's been great to hear.
Thanks so much, Joe.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.